We have, assisting me in the opining, old friend of the show, one of my regulars, Robert Weiner, Democratic strategist, columnist, and former communications director for Clinton drug czar General Barry McCaffrey. He's also former communications director for Congressman Rangel and Conyers of New York and Michigan, respectively. Bob, good to have you back.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Alan. And you remember I also was the chief of staff of the House Health Subcommittee and the House Aging Committee under Claude Pepper, which is why I am thrilled that Obama is sticking to his fight to protect the American Health Care Act.
Intriguing. We're going to get to that in just a bit, but I want to talk a little bit about the guns, and then we'll transition accordingly. I want us to go ahead and pause and have a listen to this clip. It's sort of a montage, if you will. The first little bit you're going to hear is from Vice President Biden recommending what he thinks people should buy for defense. Then the next part you're going to hear is Valerie Parlav. She's Assistant Washington FBI Director. And on September 16th, she was describing that a shotgun was used in the Navy Yard shooting and that they had no information of an AR-15, an assault weapon. The third little clip you're going to hear is from Russian television and features Christine Frazeo, on September 9th, saying that President Obama announced he is working on new legislation for banning assault weapons and universal background checks in the wake of the Navy Yard shootings. The fourth is from CNN on September 18th, featuring CNN's Chris Lawrence, saying that the Navy Yard shooter passed the background check performed when he bought the shotgun the day before the shooting. Derek, if you please.
If you want to protect yourself, get a double-barrel shotgun.
At this time, we believe that Mr. Alexis entered Building 197 at the Navy Yard with a shotgun. We do not have any information at this time that he had an AR-15 in his possession.
The president says he'll advocate to strengthen and reinstate the assault weapons ban, a 10-round limit for ammunition magazines, and that he hopes to increase access to mental health and require a criminal background check on every gun sale.
Now, while he was here, they ran his name through the federal background check database. It took a couple hours. He was here a couple hours. But basically, there was no problem in that background check. He had a valid out-of-state license from the state of Texas.
Now, Bob, I got to ask you, why is the president still pitching gun control despite its self-evident irrelevancy, at least on this occasion? I mean, even if Obama had gotten his gun control bill after the Newtown, Connecticut killings, this guy, Aaron Alexis, would have slipped through the net in an open civilian environment just as he did the Navy Yard because he had no convictions, meaning background checks would have been satisfied, and because the firearms were a shotgun and a handgun, the assault weapons ban would have been equally irrelevant, too. So can you please tell me how Obama's gun control bill would have stopped the massacre at the Navy Yard in D.C.? Bob Weiner.
Alan, you got to try, and 91% of the American people support background checks. I don't know how Congress gets away with not passing background checks.
I'm happy to talk about that, but I'm happier still.
Up.
I'm happy to talk about that, but I'm happier for you to answer my question. Given that his bill would not have stopped this man at any of these levels, why use it to push that bill?
Well, this guy heard voices from the walls and from the microwaves and had been seeing a shrink and had danger signals from psychiatrists. I'm not convinced that person is right that he would have passed the background checks if we have the data that is supposedly coming from the mental health community before people buy guns. I think that there's some error in that report, Alan. Just like there was horrendous.
Wait a second. If that were the case, wait a minute. Hold on. If that were the case,
AR-15, there was tremendous error.
If that were the case, then, if that were the case, if you believe that the elevated background check could have saved the day, why is it then that the military intelligence investigation of his background, which is arguably far more scrutinizing than the generic one that you're referencing, why is it then that failed? See what I'm saying? That failed. So why would a lesser version be more successful?
You're going to rely on that human element, the same military that took their intel from Curveball to tell us we had WMDs in Iraq, that told us we didn't have Russian and for that matter, Israeli and other spies. They couldn't find them.
Bob, we have to talk about the aggregate force.
We
have to talk about the aggregate force.
Has to go forward.
We know on balance, and I'm formerly in the military, and I had an intelligence, I had a security clearance.
Okay. So did
okay?
I in the
I was subjected to far more than would be the case.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is, even if this failed, the fact is, what failed is arguably still more scrutinizing than the civilian level. So we can, for argument's sake, say there's human failure at both levels. But what I'm pointing out
what
is
happened with the Fort Hood guy. He should have failed all background checks too. The military sucks at some things, and we got to admit that.
But they're still better at it than the civilian level.
I don't know that they're better than the corporate world.
I give you
thought
Boston.
You guys wanted
I give you Boston.
And a private enterprise helping to do things. I'm not
give you
convinced
Boston.
The military's better. I don't think their intel is better than corporate intel.
No, you're dead wrong on that.
You know, the president got his information on the Iraq wars, both of them, from CNN when he saw it on the screen before the
Bob,
CIA
if what you say is true,
if
what you say is true, wait a minute, I'm going to go follow your logic now. Let's see how consistent you can be.
Yeah.
If what you say is true, then you should have absolutely zero faith in our ability to verify whether or not Assad is truly going to be forking over all that he has. If we don't have an understanding of what his current count is, then we have no way of quantifying what his surrendered count would be or how credible it is.
I think you got a point, but I think it's an enormous breakthrough that he's admitted he has them and that he has given a list to the UN. I think that is a huge victory for the president and a step forward. And if he does any kind of chemical weapon attack again, Obama isn't going to wait for anybody's approval. The bombs will fly.
Yeah, but Bob, if we don't know what his current count is, how can we quantify his surrendered count?
The point is to stop him for the future, and I think we've got the PR machine going now to do exactly that from the entire world.
On what do you predicate that silliness?
Because even Russia said, you got to do this, Assad, and that's a big deal.
But Russia is of the opinion that he had nothing to do with the chemical attack.
I don't know that they are really convinced of that. I think that's a little – I don't believe Russia either.
Well, hold it. Let's go ahead. As long as we've slipped into Syria, we'll go ahead. I still have to ask you this one more time. If we don't know Assad's current supply, isn't it fair to say that we can't certify his surrendered supply as being all there is?
Well, I agree with that, but then we didn't believe Saddam Hussein either when he gave a foot-thick list to the UN, and in fact that was a real list when he gave that report, and then we smashed his country despite that and believed Curveball instead of him. That's my point about intel, precisely.
But my point now is that you, by virtue of your opinion, believing that corporate intelligence is far more nimble than is our military intelligence,
right?
You're showing me that we have every reason not to believe in this pending process to disarm Syria. I
agree with your point that we can't know that Assad is being honest. I wouldn't trust him further than you kick him. But I also very much believe, and I do believe this, Alan, that because of all the pressure on him now, he doesn't dare go do another chemical attack. So we have accomplished that. If he does, the entire world would not oppose the United States and probably will be joining with us in bombing the you-know-what out of him.
Well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up. Derek, if you wouldn't mind, let's shift gears a little bit and go to the issue of Syria. I want to go ahead and share with everybody this particular cut. It's let's say, number 4. Let's hear from number 4. Have a listen to this, Chris.
When there was the threat of military action by the United States, the Syrians, apparently by many accounts, did begin to move weapons stockpiles of chemical agent around the country, still believed to be largely, if not almost completely, under the control of the regime. But this is a big problem if it moves around. You pointed it out. How do you verify where it is? How do you verify it for purposes of some agreement between the Russians and the United States about destroying it all? You got to know where it is. But perhaps more importantly for the Pentagon, if they want to have a credible military option on the table, they need to know where the chemical weapons are to make sure they don't inadvertently bomb it.
So, Bob, if they've been moved around, as intelligence sources seem to indicate, then whatever he hands over won't really be an accurate count because we have no way of gauging how much he's already retained. And by default, the very problem you think would be resolved would still very much be in existence. It's just that it would be in hiding, Bob Weiner.
Well, I gave you that point. I did think, however, let me restate that you told me that we were going to be talking about health care and the Republican strategy and Obamacare on this particular show. But I'm
going to continue with that because I'm going to go ahead and put off the Daily News. So we're still going to do that. I'm going to hang you on for that. But I do want your answer to that question because
I agree with you. We don't know what Assad really has. He's probably
that means this lifeline this diplomatic lifeline that was thrown to our president is sounding more and more like frayed piece of dental floss.
No, because we stopped them for the future.
And you say that why? Because you're a student of Telepathy 101 at Clairvoyance University?
The entire world is invested in this agreement, including Russia.
Oh, that's always had efficacy in the past. Yes. The UN and all of its formidable relevance. Stick with us. More on this upon a return. You're listening to The Alan Nathan Show right here on the Main Street Radio Network.